Hi, everybody. Welcome to the 24th CITIC CLSA India Forum 2021. On behalf of CLSA, I extend a very warm welcome to all participants on this webinar. This webinar is regarding the changing banking technology landscape. And we have extremely eminent expert speakers in our webinar today. Mr. Parag Rao, who is the country head of payments, consumer finance, digital banking and technology at HDFC Bank. And we've got Mr. Sameer Shetty, president and head of digital banking and transformation at Axis Bank. I will just do a quick introduction for both our expert panelists today, and then we'll start with the session. So Mr. Parag Rao, as most of you would have interacted, met at various points, is the country head of payments, consumer finance, digital banking and technology at HDFC Bank. The payments business here includes debit cards, credit cards, commercial cards, the merchant acquiring piece, and the consumer finance business. Mr. Rao joined HDFC Bank in 2002. Under his leadership, HDFC has grown to become the market leader in payments business, in cards and acquiring business, and has retained that position over the years. Prior to joining HDFC Bank, Mr. Rao has held senior positions in IBM, Cadbury's, Unilever, and PepsiCo. He's a BTech from REC Jamshedpur and an MBA from SP Jain Institute of Management, Bombay. That's an introduction for Mr. Rao. Mr. Shetty, Mr. Sameer Shetty joined Axis Bank in July 2019 and has 16 years of experience on the digital and analyticals domain. In his previous role in McKinsey, he was partner in the financial services practice, and he was the leader of the digital and analyticals practice for financial services. Mr. Shetty is partnered with banks, NBFCs, insurance company in India, Southeast Asia, and Middle East on various engagements like setting up digital banks, building digital lending capabilities, and helping banks in their digital transformation. Mr. Shetty holds a postgraduate from IIM Bangalore, and he's a BTech in aerospace engineering from IIT Bombay. So welcome Sameer and Parag to our panel discussion. I would, honestly pose a very simple question, and do take the freedom to kind of answer in the way you think. And this, I think, is the foremost question that comes in investors' mind is, what in your view and how do you think is the preparedness of Indian banks and their IT systems, the agility that it requires in the new digital world, right? So Parag, probably if you can start off, and then we will get into specifics.
Okay, let me answer that question. If you had asked this question about 5 years ago, the answer would probably have been, hey, there's a long way to go, and that situation, and this situation across banks, not just in India, but many global institutions, emerged with this whole debate, are banks getting disrupted, etc., etc. But now 5 years down the line, and with what's happened during pandemic, global down, kind of investments, kind of changes which are happening in the banking landscape. And let me talk of the institutionalized financial, the financial institutions, etc., which covers maybe some of the NBFCs. I think a significant lot has changed. Not just regulation, but also awareness, understanding of what's happening, changing business models. A lot of awareness has sort of gotten. Positions within the banking industry, which erstwhile would have been sort of alien, I think created. You have not just chief digital officers, you have chief data officers, and engineering, various architects, API engineers, all coming into the banking. But sum and short of it is, there's a significant change. I think banks and other financial institutions have made significant leaps and bounds. A lot of them, I must admit, are below the bonnet changes, and maybe during the course of the discussion we'll sort of expand upon it a little more. But I think banks now are far more better prepared for this journey of the next 15, 20 years of what we loosely call digital. It has many facets and many dimensions. But I think we're getting there. We're getting there. So I sort of leave it at that and leave it to Samir. We both are from banking, so maybe from a viewpoint of view, we're going to sort of talk about the bank's perspective, which is, I think, very good in the topic of the discussion. So, Samir.
Thanks, Parag, and thanks, Adarsh, and a good morning to everybody who's dialed in. So I kind of, at the highest level, agree with what Parag is saying, right? I think in the last a few years, and I would say particularly in the last 2 years, the awareness, the importance of having a resilient, scalable technology has gone up manifold, and subsequently so have the investments. By the way, just kind of one good indicator of this is that the entire UPI volumes in the country are finally supported by banks. It's the banks who are kind of driving the entire UPI infrastructure. And, yes, UPI has gone through a significant improvement over the last years, and there is more to do, no doubt. But the fact that, more than 3 billion transactions a month are being supported, and that's kind of working at scale and it's working well, is I would say a little bit testament to the kind of improvements banks have done. Now, having said this, is the journey over? I would say far from. I would say we've begun the journey, and we are in a good place, but there is a lot more to be done. That's how I would kind of frame this question, the answer to this question.
That's good. Let me add as a follow through, Adarsh and Samir. The way, and it's important to put some of these digital in the perspective of banking. Banking is the second largest, also the second oldest profession in civilization, also. Okay, three core pillars is what the banking, the way consumers look at banking. One pillar is core trust, second pillar security, and the third is what we call products and services, great products and services, three core pillars. Okay, underneath these three pillars at the bottom is a common layer of what we call regulation. Okay, and above that, it's about this whole consumer experience. Now, when you look at it, digital product innovation, product and service innovation, I think is the topic which we're actually talking about. Okay, brand, trust, security. Okay, these are inherent and typical to the kind of psyche which consumers look at. What we're talking about, therefore, is product and service innovation is exactly the space where digital is sort of actually impacted. In the erstwhile days, you had manual processes, paper-based processes, etc. It's now moved to a digital layer, okay, and that's impacting the customer sort of interfaces. And this is the area I think banks need to make the maximum amount of changes, thought processes, investments. All of it is, mind you, also enabled by technology. Okay, and of course, continue focusing on the core tenets of the banking industry, which is fundamentally continue building trust, talk about security, because we've got a fiduciary responsibility of managing the wealth of consumers, and of course, great customer service. So I just wanted to put that in the context of where, therefore, the focus areas of the banking industry will have to be. Continue building on the strengths of the banking industry, and then working on this new incremental area, which is sort of coming up. Thank you. I think you're on mute, Adarsh.
Sorry, yeah. So continuing the discussion here is on, when you look at the new age, the number of transactions, the number of ecosystems, the number of partners and tie-ups is increasing at an extremely fast clip, right? Which requires systems to integrate more, driving a lot of banks to move some applications, parts of systems or whatever you could to cloud. So if you can talk about either the bank's journey or the system's journey there as to where we are and how agile the core banking platform is, what all is moving to the cloud, what can move to the cloud, and what it will enable banks to do, that will be a lot valuable for us and investors to hear from you.
Okay, Sorry, you want me to take that on? Sorry, I didn't get it.
Yeah. Maybe Samir, you want to start off and then I'll
Okay,
pass it on.
Samir, yeah, carry.
Sure. Thanks, Adarsh. So let me try to break this a little bit into components, right? Like we spoke about a number of things. But if you take the dimensions of agility, which is time to market and speed, scale, which is what volumes can you take, and resilience, which is what is the uptime, can you offer uninterrupted services and so on and so forth. And now if we split our systems into systems of engagement, which is what customers engage with us, like our mobile app or front end screens, systems of record at the bottom, which is core banking systems, right, where basically all the transactions happen. And then there are systems in the middle, which are systems of analytics and systems of workflow and so on and so forth, which basically sit on top of the core systems and they do all the other stuff, right? Like underwriting and rules and workflow and so on and so forth. So if you think of the stack in this format and with the three objectives that I mentioned, the approach we've taken is to say that our systems of engagement will move completely to the cloud. So in December 2019, Jan 2020, we made this call. And since then, by the way, almost every new product that we've introduced is cloud native. So we've already introduced, I think, about 17, 18 odd products in the last 1.5 years, which are built on the cloud. They are on production on the cloud, and they are built using cloud native technologies. And our aspiration is that over the next 2 years, 70% of our apps will move to the cloud. So that's on the systems of engagement. The middle systems as well, in parallel, they're either being built just on the cloud or we are kind of migrating many of them to the cloud, including our underwriting engine, which for many use cases, we've already kind of migrated to the cloud. The core systems are a little bit more complicated. Our view there, and different institutions are taking different views, but our view there is that for the scale of India, there isn't actually right now any proven use case of a core banking system on the cloud. And so we are kind of on a wait and watch mode there. What we've done though is that we've split our core banking into the payment stack and the non-payment stack, particularly UPI, which is where the high volume is. So we now have two instances of our core banking. One with services UPI, which is where really the very high transaction volumes are. And the second which serves, bank customers from a savings accounts, current accounts, etc. Basis, right? We are actively looking at moving the payment stack to the cloud. Having said that, that's also a big leap. So it's not like a done deal, but that's something that we are considering. And if we did something of this nature, our view is that like on the engagement side, particularly being on the cloud gives all the benefits of resilience and scale and so on and so forth. If we can take all functionality out of the core system, which I would say we've done very well actually over the last 6-7 years, every system interacts with every other system via APIs. There are almost no direct integrations now, and those APIs enable taking load out of core systems, and core systems are only doing then the record function. And if we're able to do this well, we believe we'll be able to deliver on all three dimensions that I spoke about. So this is kind of how we are thinking about this journey.
Perfect. Parag, do you want to?
Yeah. Somewhat similar to what Samir is saying in terms of thought and philosophy. The way we've looked at it in the transformation which we are undergoing right now is that starting point is that we're a large bank. Across most of the products in which the bank sort of is in, we're either number one or number two, significant volume, significant customer base, etc. And hence, we had to take a hard call about 3 years back is to say that how do you go about this transformation journey? The fact that you had to transform and talk about all that we just now did, I think was done. So how do you go about doing it? And so therefore, to cut the story short, what we did is we broke up our transformation journey into two parts, essentially. The first is what we call run the bank, in which the core job was to look at existing systems, look at system and do what we call moving from a monolithic to a hollowed core type of operation on the core. So in a sense, what Samir sort of explained, you have at the bottom the system of record, or the GL layer as you call, where the fundamental banking business debits and credits essentially happen. You have above that a processing layer, you have a middle layer, and then on top of that, you have the customer application or the customer facing layer. So the idea is to take what you call an existing monolithic setup, actually break it up into 4 different, or what you call decoupling, okay? And then sort of cloudify, or if you may call, so work on hollowing the core, which is keep the processing layer separate, look at the middleware and the customer application layer, move part of that or the middleware to the cloud, API, build APIs, and therefore, okay? And in effect, bring about the attributes which we sort of talked about, where you say you have invested in the core, wherein you can build up significant amount of processing power. That's the core of what core systems are, okay? But build in an engineered fashion the agility and the nimbleness which is required of a digital platform, okay, by using APIs, microservices, containerization, etc. And of course, the customer application layer, which will be fundamentally, primarily on the cloud, at least for the most important applications, wherein you can therefore build quicker product releases, much more nimbleness, agility, almost a DIY type sort of approach. So that is the fundamental part of running the existing bank, because you're flying a plane. The plane is flying at 36,000 feet, and you've got to sort of improve the engine, do the various repairs, add on, bolt on, etc., etc. You can't afford to land the plane. So that is the situation which we have, and we're currently in a WIP phase. This journey is going to take obviously a couple of years, okay, and we're in the midst of that. But we're definitely already seeing some early results, especially in terms of UPI. Samir mentioned about it, where we've been able to do a lot of significant below the bonnet changes and actually improve a significant amount of our throughputs. It's a very high scale throughput business. And so we're seeing the early results already. The second part of our transformation is, of course, look at what you do new and incremental. There, you directly move on to cloud, you move on to containerized architecture, mobile only, completely cloud-based applications, etc., etc. And these, like I said, once you build that layer, and just to keep it simple, you build that on a completely new digital architecture, but the umbilical cord for those systems would still be our core, what you call the system of record, or the GL layer at the bottom, okay? And so therefore, in that sense, you have 2 rails of a railway track running almost parallel, you may call so, with a sort of convergent roadmap subsequently down the future, okay? And so that's the way we are adopting the transformation journey. It's a journey, like I said, and we're in the midst of that journey. And a lot of our activities over the next 12 to 18 months, 24 months, will reap the benefits of this new architecture, transformational architecture.
Thank you. Yeah, that's quite helpful. The other question is, on a more relative basis, right? When we look at some of these new fintech companies who have developed their software and their tech architecture in the last few years, for banks like us, which have been there for a couple of decades, still refreshing technology, is it like a little bit of handicap in terms of trying to move to the cloud while somebody set it up with completely new tech architecture? Would I be wrong in saying that, Parag and Samir? Parag, do you want to go ahead with this?
If you look at it from a perspective of saying that, hey, if you're sitting on what we call monolithic architecture, well, it's a relatively more difficult thing, quite obviously, as opposed to building from the scratch. Okay, but there's a method in the way you do it, and there are various means in which you sort of cloudify. Like I said, the method we've adopted is first decouple the monolithic layer, and the relevant parts is what you sort of move to the cloud. You build the cloud infrastructure as a core competency, if you may call, or a vertical within the, right? Because the cloud is a common infrastructure which you sort of go to build for the bank, and move out relevant parts of the code sort of into what you could decide on the processing layer, you could decide on the middleware, it depends on the strategy of the bank. So to that extent, if you may call so, that's an incremental time and effort which banks need to do. But I do believe that this coupled way of working, of taking the old, and mind you, there's nothing wrong with monolithic. They were built, those were systems which were built to last, built to take scale. Okay, what they don't have is the resiliency or which is demanded of today. And so in a way, this, if you make also this hybrid model which you're talking of, is having a much more leaner, trimmer, slimmer, core, and building in a lot of these new capabilities and actually marrying them together actually gets you best of both the worlds. Okay, to that extent, yes, it's a little, the journey is a little more, if you may call so, arduous and time consuming as compared to someone who has to start from scratch, wherein I can just move to the cloud directly.
Got it. Got it. Oh, this
Yeah.
is, Samir, do you want to just add on to this?
Yeah, no, I think the, again, fully aligned with what Parag said. I think the simple answer, Adarsh, to your question is that, is it tougher to move from a tech system that was built in the 2000s to a new one versus setting up a new one? Obviously, setting up the new one is easier. But remember that it's not that straightforward, right? It is not just setting up of a new, nice looking front end. There is a lot of banking is about regulation, security, compliance, ensuring that things work 100% of the times. We can't have things that work 99% of the times, particularly on the core side, right? Like we can't have 99% of our debits were correct, 1% were wrong. We will basically be, we'll be out of our jobs the next day if that something like that happens. So that part of like hence life is a little bit more complicated, which is when you're building these flexible, scalable systems from scratch. You also need to bring in all of these regulations, compliance, checks, balances, ensure that 100% correctness and so on and so forth. And that system memory that, resides in core systems is very, very tough to just copy paste for a variety of reasons. The most important being that it's a part dependent thing, right? It's not like these things have kind of emerged over a period of time. They have not just been kind of come out. So if you take the full package, then I think I would say it's a little, we have to see who cracks it first and better. But to your very specific question, obviously it's easier to build fresh.
Got it. Now moving to, let's say the fintech part of it, I think the way I'll structure this session is, there are areas where you will collaborate, areas where you will compete, and areas probably where there is already some amount of disintermediation by fintech to traditional businesses, right? And areas where probably fintech are more acquisition engines for traditional businesses. So I just wanted to have your sense of, compete, collaborate, disintermediation from fintech for traditional businesses. If you can start with what are the areas where you see any of these three play out, that will be helpful. Samir, we'll start off with you on this.
Yeah, sure. So see, the way we think about this, we think about the business in some cohorts, right? There is one cohort which is no capital requirement, no requirement of a physical network, and businesses which have a lot of operating leverage. So as an example, the entire investments business, right? Insurance, mutual fund, equity, etc., etc. These, you don't need any major capital requirement. There is very little regulatory requirement of that nature. It can scale. These areas are where we believe there is a real threat of, this winner takes all type of models emerging, and real threat of disintermediation. At this point, though, I must say that actually we don't see that happening. So as an example, while all these mutual fund RIAs have really kind of come up in the market, our digital mutual fund sales is growing at more than 100% a year for the last 2 years. And so it's not like we are kind of, customers are moving away from banks to these institutions. But I think a time will come when, right now the mutual fund penetration is very, very small. Equity penetration is very, very low. Insurance penetration is very, very low. Maybe 5 years down the line, 7 years down the line, a time will come when the market growth in itself will become constrained, will reach some saturation. At that point, there'll be competition. Maybe this space is something that likely could be disintegrated. Then there are the other spaces like, lending or deposits, where for like example, lending is a capital intensive business, right? You need to kind of have capital if you're lending. And also it's a risk business where Actually, multiple people taking the risk is better than one person taking all the risk. And so these spaces we don't think will become will move into this winner takes all type of markets. They will always be maybe 4, 5, 6 players who will play in this space, and all will do well, provided they manage the economics. And same on deposits, right? It's very difficult to imagine all the deposits go to one institution. So in these spaces we don't see that happening. Now in terms of this compete, disintermediate, collaborate, so actually we are looking at competing and partnering in every space for us of the financial services. The spaces where we are more keen are where partners can bring growth to us. They can bring new business and new customers, and a lot of this is in the space of as an example, lending, or in terms of payments, or in terms of deposits. But at the same time we are building our own capabilities in the same space as well. So in most spaces we see ourselves both competing as well as collaborating.
Got it. And Parag, as I throw in this question to you, given your experience, leadership in running the cards and the acquiring business, I want to add a couple of questions, right? A lot of payment businesses have become huge merchant acquiring businesses, POS, QR codes. I just want to understand, how does this affect banks, right? They're able to build merchant relationships, now lend to merchants, probably be giving out consumer credit at the checkout points, be it physical or digital. So that's one. And number two, in terms of, yeah, probably if you can blend in your question with the acquiring side of how you see that landscape change, because you all have been leaders there, and what are you seeing on ground?
Okay. So I'll start off by saying that, finally, this whole journey, you call it transformation journey, digital journey, or a hybrid journey, it's a marathon race. Okay. So, and it's not about who's first off the block. Okay. It's about the last man or men standing. Okay. And during this whole journey from the starting of the block to the end, there are multiple things which you need to do, including to looking at change business models, etc., etc. And that's the resiliency which you sort of build in when you build a very strong and robust business model. Having said this, the way we look at now competition, and let me admit it, I think this realization, if you may call so, is come to us, I think, over the last 3 to 5 years only. Okay. Prior to that, traditional bank, saying that, hey, this is our space and sort of let's compete, limited number of competition. But then in that sense, so the competition is now proliferated, not just in terms of numbers, but also types of competition. You have different entities now sort of competing, or at least attempting to compete sort of in this space. The way we're looking at a lot of these different types of competition is very simple. First, primarily, they're actually helping expand the ecosystem. Okay. This may sound a profound statement, but the fact of the matter is that whether it's in places like UPI, and whether it's in places that many of the areas, example, local mobility, this whole taxi, Uber, Ola, you look at home delivery, and you can keep on naming many of these categories, customer categories, I think also. They've expanded the market rapidly and actually increased consumption. And so in that sense, I think no individual bank can sort of hope to sort of do that all alone. And so a lot of the players which are there, without even taking names, are actually expanding consumption. That's the core in which banks sort of live. And our job is what? To move money from point A to point B. Okay, we've got the reins, and we've got the processing capability, the underwriting capability, we've got fiduciary responsibility, we work with deposits, and sort of we're in the business of assets. What is it that we don't have is this nimbleness, agile, sexy, if you may call so, customer interfaces, etc., etc. And so therein comes our whole philosophy of saying partnerships and alliances with many people, or many of these new players, if you may call so, who have certain strengths in the customer application layer, things which banks will take some more time to sort of adopt, given the transformation plan which we just now talked about. Okay, but what does the bank bring to the table? All of this wealth of experience in the financial space, We are doing our transformations even on our core. So we are actually building in scale. We're building in security measures, a lot of investments sort of going in, partnering with many of these players to sort of have a common interface, use the strengths of the new age players in terms of their customer management, nice, like I said, interface, etc. And so and help penetrate actually newer markets and newer segments which were erstwhile not there. Okay, and that's been a large portion of our future strategy. Okay, partnership. We're also but our partnership strategy doesn't sort of just remain there only at the front end. There's a lot of partnerships which are also happening below the bonnet at the back end, wherein newer ways of working, newer technologies, etc., merge with the existing ways of doing. That's also a lot of behind the bonnet, if you make, also partnerships which you're looking at. So, to sum it up, it's how you look at it. You can choose to look outside in, or you can choose to look at inside out. If you look at an inside out perspective, you can always see everyone coming here to sort of disintermediate or sort of disrupt. We're actually going out and upfront and saying, hey, let's open up this market together. Let's do this. You bring 3 strengths to the table. I bring 2 strengths to the table. Together, I think we can form a formidable force. That's the sort of sound message which we've started increasingly believing in, and that's the message which we're sort of giving to partners. And we do believe it's obvious in India, there's a significant headroom to grow in any segment you take it. Okay, we're barely penetrated. Most of our categories are under-penetrated, so it's significant room to grow. And there's enough place for good, strong, sound, reliable, consistent players, people who are going to be at the end of the race standing. Okay, and
got it. Thanks. So that brings me to the point, right? Both the banks have had large fintech collaborations. HDFC with Paytm, Axis with a POS operator. So just wanted to understand, what are your gives and takes here? What's the key motivation of getting into some of these partnerships? Samir, do you want to start off?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Adarsh. I think actually Parag covered this fairly well in his response, which is if you look at where India is, and if you look at any metric of financial, adoption or penetration, and given the overall size and demographics of India, there is, significant potential for the market to expand. So we strongly believe that, the kind of India is not about taking share away from some other player. India is about just growing the pie, and how much we can contribute in growing that pie is what is kind of going to create value for us and for our shareholders. And if we take that lens, we've been quite clear for a couple of years now that partnerships is a very critical element of our strategy to grow and to win in the digital space. So what do partners bring to us? Partners bring the customer reach, so the ability to kind of reach different customers and to offer them services at the point that they want it, and which is where this entire ecosystem kind of thing comes into effect, right? That like one example we keep giving is that many years back, if you had to take a vacation, you would have to go to a travel agent, book a ticket, go to a bank, take a loan, go to another bank, take forex, go to an insurance company, take insurance, and so on and so forth. Today, you can all of these merge at one point. So you can book your flight ticket. Potentially, you can kind of get the loan at the same point in time. You can get a forex at the same point in time. You can get insurance at the same point in time, and so on and so forth. And that this ecosystem is what kind of some of the players can bring, wherein the customers' need at that point in time can be serviced if we partner with them. So they bring in customers, they bring in these touch points, and they bring in data as well. So, a lot of our partnerships are where we are able to underwrite customers better, or we are able to provide them services better, just because we know them better, because of what they are doing on some of our partners. So this is what we get in terms of the gives. Obviously, there is, in this partnership model, the economics get split 3 ways, right? There is something that typically ends up going to the customer. As you know, as you kind of try to build this ecosystem, you end up passing something to the customer. Second is obviously the partner also has to benefit. So there is some bit of the economics that passes on to the customer, and then the rest of it remains with you. There are some benefits also, which is your cost of acquisition typically is lower compared to if you had done it organically. Your cost of acquisition will be lower, and ideally, and this is starting to bear out a little bit in facts, that your risk cost will also be better because you know the customer slightly better than you did earlier. So this is the give get. Overall, the economic look, I mean, this is very early, so we have to see how this entire space plays out. Our sense is that the profitability, if you use the traditional kind of ROA type of a metric, will be slightly lower when we do it via partners compared to if we do it organically. Having said that, as an example, our market share is 5%, and if working with somebody gets us from 5 to 7, and for that we have to part with some of the economics, we are happy.
I think I'll start taking some questions. Participants, there are two formats to ask your questions. One is you could either type it out, which many of you have already done, or you could raise your hands, right? So I have an interesting question, Parag, probably address it to you, is what is the fundamental reason why credit card penetration is so low? Example, Nubank in Brazil has created a stack underwriting engine to probably card the uncarded population. What are Indian banks doing to solve this problem, right? So if you could, if you could respond to that.
Sorry. Let me put it this way. Okay. Yeah. Till about even 4 or 5 years back, I think the penetration was pretty low. I think the industry has seen significant growth in the last couple of years, where the sort of card base has doubled, which itself is showing a greater maturity, a greater opportunity, which many of the current existing players are seeing in the run rates, etc., etc. You need to see this question, and I'll move away from a product form to actually saying that what you're actually talking about is small line credit to customers. Okay, credit card is just a form factor, but it's essentially small line credit, which you're saying sort of the area in which banks sort of need to look at. And here, I think, and I'll couple it with today's discussion, the new form or the new kid on the block, what everyone knows as BNPL, actually is actually helping expand and move to this headroom of talking about being the ability to offer on the fly small line credit to drive consumption in this space. So while BNPL, in my view, doesn't compete at all directly with credit cards at all, okay, because it's addressing a completely new set of segment, significantly lower ticket sizes. But then when you see credit cards, PL, smaller ticket PL, and then you take BNPL, all three put together, this actually addresses a significant opportunity, which is typically only addressed by the conventional products. Okay, and I see, and the way we see it is significant growth there. Here you're seeing a large number of players, especially in the BNPL play. A lot of these BNPL players actually, and BNPL, let me tell you, while it is a convenience product, it's also an asset product in that sense. So essentially, any player in that segment needs to really talk of two things. One is the customer layer, which gives great experience. Okay, a nice experience, because ultimately BNPL is a convenience product. Below the bonnet, you're talking of strong, it's an asset product. So therefore, you're talking of great underwriting skills and the ability to stand. So a large amount of capital required for you to sort of build up. Here too, we see a significant opportunity for banks and players to sort of, partner together. Okay, because the BNPL business is about offering small line credit to a large scale business. So it's a large scale business, and we see a good opportunity to grow. Simultaneously, having said, my view is also very clear. The headroom in payments is still significantly high to grow. So over the years, you'll see each and every payment form actually going to grow, whether it's on UP on one side, whether it's BNPL on the other side, credit card, debit card, and other multiple forms of payment. All of them are going to grow at their own respective pace. Okay, and it's the customer who's finally going to choose which form actually suits him. Reality is that, and you've already started seeing that, is you'll actually see customers who earlier preferred only one form of payment, actually adopting multiple form of payment. So consumers like you, me, etc., all of us on this call use even today also multiple forms of this thing. We've started using X type of spends, we want to use a credit card, Y type of spends, we use a net banking, Z type of spends, we use UPI. And so actually what's happening is the customer wallet is actually expanded. So that's the way we see the market, and all form factors will actually grow here forward.
Perfect. There is a question from Laila from Aberdeen Group. What's the two banks' view on significant milestones or KPIs they need to hit in their digital transformation journey? And what's the time period that you all are looking at, whether you've made that significant headway in your digital journey?
Samir, you want to take that and then I'll take it?
Maybe you want to start with that.
Sure, thanks. So from our digital journey perspective, there are three types of milestones that we are looking at, or three KPIs at the highest level that we are looking at. The first one is a growth type of a KPI, which is how much does digital add in terms of overall growth of the bank. I mean, the KPI itself is in two parts. There is a customer acquisition type of an angle here, and there is a kind of a revenue or a top line type of an angle here. So that is one KPI, and I think it's perhaps the most important KPI from our digital journey perspective. We have a 3-year type of a time frame here to make a solid dent. Obviously, I can't share any numbers, etc., but that's kind of how we are looking at this. The second KPI we are looking at is a profitability or a cost income or a cost to assets type of a KPI, which is the other belief is that as we do business digitally, it gives us operating leverage. So our costs come down and so on and so forth. And it is bearing through actually in many of the stuff that we are